It's really cool. So we were ready for Mr. Subban.
Certainly hope so.
Okay.
Oh, it's ringing. Skype has been unbelievable
I
lately.
love it.
Looking for Karl Subban, his new book, How We Did It, here on rawmikerichards.com. Haven't talked to the man in a while. I am looking for Karl Subban. It's Mike Richards from rawmikerichards.com.
Mike, good morning. Karl Subban here.
Oh, great to talk to you. Hey, it's been a while, and at first I thought, so I'm confused right now. I thought you had retired, but are you back at school again?
Yes, I did retire. I've been in retirement for 4 years, and then I was asked by someone to head back to Brookview Middle School in Jane Finch. I'm there working until December.
So you're kind of doing what Michael Jordan did. You retired, and now you're coming back for the money. Is that what you're doing? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I just, you know what? I guess I want to hit some home runs too with the kids up there. So I realize now that how much I miss being with the kids and miss the profession. So it's nice to be back.
Well, Karl, being from a family of teachers, father, my brother, a teacher, married to a teacher, it's teachers and coaches all on my side. So I certainly understand, and as people, I think, have to realize it is certainly not a vocation you do for the money. It is something that you do because it's your lifestyle. It's who you are. It's the nature of mentoring. It's the understanding of what you get back from doing a job like that, because it's probably more than just a job. And that's why I think in writing this book, How We Did It, those kinds of standards that you have as a professional, they come from somewhere, and generally it comes from family. And when I look at your boys and how they act, it's obvious they've come from structure. And I think that what you do professionally, and obviously what you've done personally, and I believe would be in this book, it's got to start somewhere. And to me, it's always family first.
No, you're right. You are so right. You've heard this. I've heard this saying, the home is the first school and the parents are the first teachers. And when the home is a really good school and those teachers are good, especially in those early years, it really sets our children up for success.
Well, in this book coming out, obviously at some point, maybe you were retired when you did this. Was this something that you were approached by? Now, having written a book myself, someone approached me and said, would you write this book? But how was that for you? Was it something that you wanted to write, or were you approached?
Well, it was during my last 7 years or 6 or 7 years of teaching, of leading a school. I decided that, listen, I started to think about retirement, and one of the things I wanted to do was to write a book just about teaching and working with young people. That's what I wanted to do. And the second thing I wanted to do in retirement was to do some public speaking. But, as my career winded down, the boys' popularity started to grow, especially PK, and Malcolm and Jordan followed suit in Belleville, and Malcolm played on Team Canada and eventually was drafted, and Jordan was drafted. And over that time, everywhere I would go, people would ask us, and Maria too, my wife, how did we do it? What did we do to raise 3 boys who were drafted and signed by NHL teams? And so that question became like a familiar narrative everywhere I would go. And so I decided that I wanted to write a book. And then I was doing my tour, working for another company, my media tour. And then I ran into a friend of mine, Scott Colby, who was my co-author. And he attended the Lakehead basketball camps when I was a student athlete at Lakehead University. And we also worked at A&P together. And he said, Karl, do you want to write a book? I said, Scott, you know what? I've been thinking about it. Let's have coffee. And there we go. You have the book in front of you.
Yeah, it's a great read as well, Karl. Great talking to you this morning. Thanks for joining us on the show. Listen, so when you're putting together thoughts of a book, and I'm holding it up right now for everybody watching on camera, when you're putting down thoughts and thinking about what I want to portray in this book, what's the timelines for you? How long did you actually put into this, considering that, you're talking about raising 3 boys, 2 daughters, you and your wife, that's a handful. I have 2 girls myself, and I sometimes lose my head. You have 5, Karl. So
Yes.
I'm just wondering, how did that work?
And I have 400 in the school I'm working at right now. So 405. That's what educators say.
So how did that, like, timelines and putting down all your thoughts to paper? I'm guessing this was probably over the course of a couple of years before you thought, okay, I want this in there, I want this in there. How long did it take you to put this together, Karl?
Well, Scott and I got together. It took us about 2 years. In terms of writing the book, it took a year and then another year to do all the drafts and to make it into what you see today. But it took about 2 years. But the stories about my life in Jamaica, my life in Sudbury, my life together with my wife, and then we had the children, my years in education, and obviously the hockey years play a big part. So it's like I lived that book. So it wasn't difficult to come up with the stories and the beliefs and the values that guided us. But you know what? I got better as a writer as time went on, and I had my little island in the kitchen. I would sit there, and after a while, it was easy to write 5,000 words. You know what I mean? And then I wanted the readers to be inspired. I wanted them to feel something, and I wanted them to think about something, and most importantly, I wanted them to do something. And hopefully the book will be able to do all those things.
We're in conversation with Karl Subban here on rawmikerichards.com. I'm just curious, Karl, did you ever get a phone call from PK and him saying, so what did you put in that book? What are you writing down there?
Well, you know what? Their voices, all my 5 children were interviewed by Scott Colby. He taped them, and because there's some questions around parenting, and the children had their voices are in the book. But you know what? A lot of the stuff they heard, a lot of the sayings, a lot of the stories, like there's a story that that I have given the boys and all my children and the girls too, about not trusting people. That you can trust them, but you know that people are capable of doing things that we don't like. And it's a story that I experienced, and it's in the book. So PK already knows that story, and they know so many parts of the book. My wife's voice is also in the book. So even though Karl Subban is one of the authors for the book with Scott Colby, my children are part of the storytelling.
I didn't realize, Karl, you were such a Ken Dryden fan. How did you get to be a big fan of arguably one of the greatest Canadian goaltenders of all time?
Wow, yeah, it's such a big part of my life and helped to shape my life more than he might know. But we came to Sudbury as 12 years old when we went to Sudbury, and I grew up in a street called Peter Street. It's now Mountain Street in Sudbury, Ontario, and all the kids were francophones. And hockey was, and I'm speaking my Jamaican patois, they're speaking French, but the one language we understood was hockey. And the one position I knew was goalie, because back in Jamaica when I played soccer, and also in Sudbury and Thunder Bay where I went to school, I was a goalie. That was the position I identified with. And because I saw the Montreal Canadiens almost every night on TV in those days, we only had 2 stations, French and English. And so I fell in love with the Canadiens, and in turn fell in love with Ken Dryden. And I had a dream in Jamaica to be a cricketer, but I also had a dream in Canada in my early years to be an NHL goalie. Mind you, it didn't have a lot of shelf life, but Ken has influenced me. And so if I did play hockey, the position I would have played, and Malcolm, there he is, being a goalie. And so I guess Dad, they say we're not supposed to live our dreams for our kids, but you know what? I'm going to live mine through Malcolm.
Well, Karl, I'm thinking if I'm living in Jamaica and someone says, I've got a choice of two places you can go to. You can go to Sudbury or Thunder Bay. My answer is neither.
Yeah,
you can't be further away from what you lived into going to those two places, Karl.
And that's why my life has been so interesting. And the book is so interesting because there's a whole chapter in Sudbury. And there's a one chapter there in Thunder Bay, my experiences there. And just a friendship. And like in Sudbury, I was introduced to hockey. And hockey gave me friends. It gave me so much. It gave me something to, it gave me a dream. It gave me something to do. It gave me something to love. And you know what? It gave me something to like about my new country, as you can imagine, the culture shock. And Thunder Bay, that's where Terry Fox ended his cross-Canada journey. And Terry and I were born in the same year, and he's influenced me so much. And that's why there's the title in the Thunder Bay chapter, The Sleeping Giant. And you know what's there in Thunder Bay, The Sleeping Giant. But, it's so far removed from Jamaica, both places, but they played a huge role in Karl Subban as a person.
Now, Karl, the one thing that we certainly didn't talk about a couple of years ago when we met, and I guess maybe it's the one thing in Canada that we don't think of often because we don't think of ourselves as overly bigoted or racist, and yet we're living right now in a climate where it's about as tense and sometimes ugly as I've ever seen it. Now, coming from Jamaica and going to Sudbury and Thunder Bay, where I am sure you would have been one of the few, if only black person on either the street, in your class, on your team, and therefore you get a completely different perspective now in raising your kids, and going south of the border where it is very, very different. What is your perspective on just what we're seeing culturally with the talk of inequality, which we know exists, but just the way that young people are handling it? And quite honestly, with your guys who are professional athletes, they play in American cities, what kinds of lessons or experience did you have in coming to this country, and where do you think it's ended up for your guys in terms of equality?
A very good question. Well, when PK started out, we were probably the only black. Maria and I were the only black people in most arenas. Okay, and growing up in Sudbury, there were few black families there, but so it was like those early hockey years. We didn't see a lot of people who looked like Karl and Maria Subban around. But the one lesson I guess my parents gave me, and Maria had it in her too, is that we're not. I'm going to make this statement. I'm not sure what role race played in my achievements and my children's achievements, but the one thing I know for sure, and I'm going to say this, is that we didn't want race to be the excuse or the reason why we didn't do something in life or we didn't achieve in life. But that's one thing. Going back to my Sudbury days, I experienced the power of sports to unite us. First was when I came to Canada, hockey was the tool that helped me to integrate into this country. Without it, I don't think I would have transitioned into my new culture as well as I did. It was because of the sports. And also, I remember the 72 Russia-Canada series. I'm sitting there at Lansdowne Senior Public School in Sudbury, Ontario, in the basement. And Sudbury is a very diverse city. And so I'm sitting there with all these children whose families are from different parts of the world who are working in the mines. And guess what? They were all cheering for one team, Team Canada. And that's the power of sports. And there were no politics there that day. There was no religion. It was just we're cheering for Team Canada. And that is the power of sports. You see, sports can unite us like nothing else can in our society. And like PK said, he's not going to disrespect the flag. I didn't speak to him about it, but I agree with him that yes, there are injustices, racial injustices, there are injustices around sexism and so on. However, I think that there are other places where we can make our point. There are other places where we can protest. I don't want to take the power of sports away. And sports is also a diversion for so many of us. Life is so hectic. It's so stressed. And you know what? I look forward to Saturday night, on the hockey night in Canada, sitting down and not worrying about who's raising their fist or who's kneeling. Saturday or Sunday afternoon, I want to watch a football game and talk about the touchdowns and the great plays, not about who's kneeling. But there's a place for it. There is a place for it. And I'm working in a community where I see injustices, where I see what poverty is doing, because poverty, as you know, affects outcomes, both educational and life. So, but there are places where we can stand up and protest and let others hear us. But I don't want to see it on the basketball court or on the soccer field or in the hockey arena. That's just my opinion.
Karl, thank you so much for joining us here today. And I realize you couldn't have skipped school because you can't give yourself a tardy slip or you give yourself a detention. But you know what? I love just talking with you, and I know the book is going to be wildly successful because it's great lessons, I think, for everybody. And as you said, it is not race related; it is human related, and it's your experience as not only a father, a husband, someone who's come from another country, but also as a professional, and one that, of course, I greatly respect. So I wish you all the luck in the world. And at some point, when you're able to escape the school, maybe you can come down here and sit with us, because I'd like that too.
Yes, I definitely want to do that. I definitely would love to. You guys have invited me, and I'm going to make some time. Let's keep in touch.
That would be a great idea.
Thanks so much, Karl.
Thank you so much, Karl.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
That is Karl Subban talking about his brand new book, and it is entitled How We Did It.
What? Did we just become best friends?
Yep.